early church is not Protestant, and one way we know that is because they do not have a set canon of Scripture, and so they are using consistently tradition, and it's only centuries later that there is a canon of Scripture.
Hey, what's up?
What's up?
Could you go ahead and
So J, faking J.
something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you can go ahead and still man your claim a bit more.
Yeah, so my position is that if you look at the early church, particularly the first 3 centuries, but we don't have to stop there. We can go to 4th and 5th and 6th as well.
Sure.
You will find that they do not have a consistent, clear canon of Scripture. In fact, many of the church fathers will list between East and West varying texts of canons of Scripture, right? In the 4th century in the West, you have the Council of Rome in the 380s, and that canon of Scripture includes the Deuterocanon. In the Eastern Apostolic canons in the 4th century, you have a canonical list that includes the Deuterocanon, okay? So I'm not saying that that settled the canon. I'm saying that by the 4th century, East and West, what is the normative practice is to cite and use the Deuterocanon. So even if there's not a set universally accepted canon, there's still no evidence for the Protestant canon except for St. Jerome, and there's no reason why as a Protestant I have to accept or should accept Jerome's canon.
So we need the Eastern Orthodox Church to determine the canon is a big chunk of your claim.
It's inextricably bound up with the providential move of history that the East and the West both were involved in the process of formation of the canon.
But just a yes or no, is the Eastern Orthodox Church needed in order to establish a canon?
It did establish the canon.
Yes, I mean...
You're assuming that there's these different churches. Is there a different church in the first 8 centuries?
I mean, I think that whenever we discuss the term early church, whenever you mean Protestant, do you just mean like generally one that a sort of belief that doesn't confide with Catholics
particularly here it's about the canon,
Orthodox?
So that's why I mentioned St. Jerome and the Protestant canon.
Mm-hmm. I mean, whenever we talk about the Eastern Orthodox Church establishing a canon, if you're going to connect that to Eastern Orthodoxy being like the fullest of the faith, I think that what we're going to end up running into here is a bit of a, like, what type of standard did the Church Fathers, did the Eastern Orthodox Church go to in order to establish what was Scripture and what was not? Did they go by like historicity, or did they just know what was canon?
Well, if you look at the canonical debates in the various councils, they looked at what the church fathers prior to them accepted, what the apostolic sees handed down and passed down as tradition. For example, that Matthew wrote the Gospel of Matthew. You look at the other councils that were prior to those councils. For example, Trullo will look back to the previous ecumenical councils when it says we accept what Carthage said about the Old Testament canon. That's why it includes the Deuterocanon. So I really hinge this argument on the acceptance of the Deuterocanon by the 4th century East and West. So why would I think that I don't accept the Deuterocanon as a Protestant?
So just to elaborate a bit, for everything, a good chunk of the things you just listed have to do with history. So would you say that history is the basis as which the Eastern Orthodox...
I listed one element of history, not everything.
I mean, you said so that it had to do with the...
Well, you don't think the canon was a historical decision?
I think that and do you think like in the sense of like, do I believe like the canon was established at some point? Yeah, I'm confused on what you're talking about.
Okay, when?
Like a direct time, I probably wouldn't get a saint off the top of my head.
So, but I'm argue that 4th century you have apostolic canons in the East and you have Council of Rome in the West, and those are normative for East and West by 4th century. I'm not saying that they are authoritative, even necessarily infallible or whatever. I'm just saying East and West, universally for the most part, except for Jerome, accepted the Deuterocanon.
And you're connecting that to the idea that you...
The argument is the Orthodox Church is the most faithful to the early church. So why does your church, whatever that is, Protestant, not have the deuterocanonical books? Because it's not faithful to it.
I mean, like I said earlier, I feel like the idea that we're just going to keep running into it's the fact that I feel like what you're doing here just really isn't faithful, if I'm being honest.
What?
I feel like it's just not really faithful here. What I'm being honest with.
Okay, did I make an argument? How is it not faithful?
I mean, I feel like what we're talking about here, if you're connecting the fact that we're like we don't have certain scripture. I believe that's right. We don't have certain scripture, and therefore what we have is less of the faith. I just don't see.
Okay, so then tell me why the Protestant church is more faithful to the early church then.
I mean, you've given an argument. I'd like for you to expand on that even more.
So, again, I'm arguing that if I look at the first, second, third, fourth century in the 300s, the East and West are using the Deuterocanon, and I cited the specific examples. And then by the 6th and 7th century, the Eastern Church and the Western Church agree on the Deuterocanon almost universally. Now, for the Roman Catholics, they have a different measure because they're going to look at the Council of Rome because Pope Damasus said it, so therefore that makes it normative for them. From the Orthodox perspective, we're more interested in totality and collegiality. So for us, East and West, speaking at an ecumenical council is when the 7th Council accepts Trullo, which Rome doesn't accept, but regardless, East and West agree by the 7th Ecumenical Council, and it includes the Deuterocanon. So I'm saying if we take those first 4 centuries or the first 7 centuries, we don't see the Protestant canon except for St. Jerome. But if we're going to go with Jerome in terms of most faithful to the early church, then why, as a Protestant, should I accept what Jerome said?
Yeah, I'll end it right here. I'll go on. I'll let someone else take over this.
All right.